So we're going to talk about Panic Button for a moment, not just because they have announced that Warframe is coming to Switch, and I have some additional details on that we'll get into a little bit later in this video, but because Panic Button has been one of the major, or probably the only major company out there that is actively porting AAA quality games to Switch. Now, previously, they originally actually, I think, started with Rocket League, which is an indie title, but then quickly moved on to Doom and then Wolfenstein 2 for Bethesda. And there might be even more Bethesda games, coming down the line from Panic Button. But Warframe is a game that's obviously been out for a little while now, and I didn't want to talk about it when it first got announced because I wanted to give myself some time to learn a bit more about the game. And the more I learn about it, the more excited I seem to get, although I understand some of the trepidation. When you hear that Panic Button has another big game coming out after they just did Doom and Wolfenstein 2, you're probably expecting something that's at least released in the past couple years, and Warframe came out 5 years ago, and it's free. Now, it being free really shouldn't matter if we're being honest, because Paladins is a free-to-play game as well, and they're charging money for it on Switch, and that hasn't seemed to stop the popularity of Paladins on Switch, despite the fact there's a $30 entry point that doesn't exist, by default on any other platform. So, reality is, just because the game is free, and Warframe's interesting in its freeness because obviously when games are free, the big panic button, ironically, on that is that there's going to be tons of loot boxes and DLC and microtransactions, and somehow Warframe is surviving without being scummy. In fact, Warframe is maybe a pillar example of how you can take and make a AAA quality game and have microtransactions in it, DLC in it, but not feel like you're nickel and diming consumers. And it's very strange because, Overwatch, as an example, gets by having, loot boxes that everyone defends in Overwatch because they're optional. And yeah, they're optional, but I don't know. When you're a gamer, you want to stand out, so you don't really feel like they're always optional, and they give you free ones and stuff like that. But let me explain how Warframe, at least based on what I was able to read and what I was able to research, I don't have hands-on experience, but how they actually make money. So the model isn't something that's new, but it's something that is not seen as much today. And what they do basically is, in the game, you can earn everything in this game without spending a dime. And we're not talking about how you need to spend hundreds of thousands of hours. It's more so one of those things where everything's attainable in-game and is enjoyable to obtain in-game. In fact, one of the main facets of leveling up gear and obtaining new items is actually part of the unique charm and the fun of this game. Now, for those who don't know, Warframe is like a shooter, combat-based game, but it's a PvE game, which means they don't necessarily need to worry about balance concerns like you need to worry about in PvP. So they don't have to worry about people being way outgeared from somebody else or all that stuff, because it doesn't matter. All that matters is what gear does your team have and what are you fighting against, and be a ninja and have some crazy fun. Well, the thing is you could buy some of this gear as well. You could buy blueprints, basically. You could pay real money to unlock blueprints for the gear you want. You can also spend money to speed up the crafting process of that gear. Now, we've seen this in, I'm trying to think of, there's a mobile game I played recently. Was it Final Fantasy Tactics or something, where you could spend money to basically speed up building buildings and stuff like that. It's kind of similar to that. Or you could just wait. And you don't really feel, at least personally, when I played that game, I never really felt like I needed to spend money unless I'm just impatient, because I grew up playing, games like Age of Empires and StarCraft and stuff like that, where, yeah, you build buildings and you have to wait. The building process is not instant. So it doesn't really bother me. Now, what's also really cool is you can also spend money for specific warframes or little bundles of content without spending money on loot boxes or anything like that. There's no lottery involved here. You know exactly what you're buying, or you could just get the stuff in game. You want a particular weapon, you know where that weapon is, or even in the store, you buy a blueprint for a gun, it'll tell you where you can farm the materials to build that gun. You don't need to buy the blueprint and then be left farming, a zillion places until you get it. kind of like in an MMO, you know, how you got to farm materials and craft things. Well, even in RPGs in general. But yeah, it's a very interesting way of doing things. And the thing is, the gameplay itself is so fun. The crafting is so fun. The seeking out of new weapons is so fun that everything is built to not really be a game that you need to spend money on. That's the crazy thing about Warframe. It's a free-to-play game that is made so much fun in how it works that it actually sort of encourages you not to spend money. The only reason that you would spend money is because you just don't enjoy those aspects of the game, which would be why you play in the game, or because you just want to speed through things quickly because you don't have a lot of time and you don't want to waste time, farming for a blueprint for a weapon. You just want to buy the blueprint and then worry about farming the materials. Basically, it comes down to people who are impatient. If you're impatient, that's how they make their money. Very, very interesting because this was one of the first, I think it was actually the first free-to-play game to come out on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. And even though this game released in 2013, quote-unquote released, there's reviews for it out back then, it was very much an incomplete experience. What we need to remember about Warframe and its giant history is the studio that made it, Digital Extremes, was basically going to go out of business. And they didn't want to try to get this fun. And Digital Extremes, they've worked on Unreal Tournament 2, BioShock 2, etc., etc., etc. They worked on a whole bunch of games, especially the multiplayer aspects. But that's neither here nor there, right? Warframe's great. Warframe's a fantastic game. It started out very, very dinky. It wasn't much to look at, but the gameplay itself was fun. And over time, they slowly made more and more money, and they were able to build it out to what it is today, where in 2017, the player base for Warframe doubled over the player base in 2016 because the game is constantly getting better. So for a lot of people out there that, I did a poll about is Warframe a big deal, little deal, or what the heck is this? I think it's a pretty big deal. I just want to throw it out there. Panic Button's doing this game. I think it's a big deal because it's a growing game. It's a game finding its, its ball sack, I guess, right now. It is just hitting its stride and running away with it. And it's great to see that this game is going to be on Switch. This isn't your run-of-the-mill free-to-play game. This is a game made by a team that knows how to make AAA games, and they've done it the right way, branching out on their own and just making this thing fantastic over the course of 5 years. This is what's a well-rounded, well-polished game by the time it's on Switch versus what it was when it first released in 2013. And I say quote-unquote released because it was basically like a pre-alpha free-to-play release where they just needed to get it out there because they were about to go out of business and pray that people enjoyed the gameplay enough to maybe join their founders program and help this game get off the ground. And it worked. So good for them. It's got a great story. But when it comes to Panic Button themselves, they had this to say about the Switch and the future of Switch, because Panic Button is obviously becoming quickly the lead studio here for porting third-party games, especially of the higher quality AAA variety. And they said this: it's a really neat piece of hardware and we're learning more all the time. We work closely with Nintendo and Nvidia, and it's an opportunity for us to do more and more with the hardware. It's interesting. It is still pretty early for the Switch as a gaming device, so I'm excited to see what happens on the hardware and the optimizations front. It'll be interesting because who knows what's going to happen with the next generation. Does one party do an even beefier, more powerful machine? Do they look at what's happening with Nintendo and try to do that? Will they do both? Nintendo in previous generations has made it clear they're not competing on horsepower. Switch is a great example of delivering that without impacting the quality of the games. And they made some great partnerships with Bethesda to bring AAA content to their platforms. Maybe when they evolve the hardware, they'll amp up in one area. Maybe that'll be graphics or hardware. Maybe they'll add to the controller set so it has additional inputs similar to other platforms. There's a lot of innovations to be had. So Panic Button's obviously excited by Switch, and they're obviously getting paid by big companies at this point. Now Bethesda, and then what did I just say? Digital Extremes, and previously the folks behind Rocket League, and who knows what after this? Maybe they're working on multiple ports at once for Switch. Who knows? But it's just very, very exciting to me to see a developer talking about this about Switch. Even though these are people who are specifically specializing in porting to Switch, it's very nice to see them look at it this way because Nintendo has nowhere to go with the Switch really but up. I know someone's going to try to call out delivering that without impacting the quality of the games, and you're going to call out 60 FPS to 30 FPS, HD to sub HD with Doom and Wolfenstein 2. I don't really care. You kind of people have your platforms to play on and your way that you want to play. I own a gaming PC and an Xbox One, and I'll eventually own a PlayStation 4. And I know these games run, look, and play better on those platforms. That's not really their point. The point is the core experience is brought to Switch, and people who do want to play it on Switch are getting that quality core experience. So this gets lost on a lot of people. Video games are not just about frame rates and resolution. It's about how fun the game is to play, and that core fun experience of Wolfenstein 2 and Doom are there. So that's what really matters the most. Now, setting all that aside, I am just very, very stoked that Panic Button is excited for Switch's future, because as I said, what's going to happen from now? Optimization's only going to get better over time. There's plenty of space for Nintendo right now to improve the hardware in the future, whether it's a Tegra X2 or a brand new custom chip that is backwards compatible that NVIDIA could be working on. I've heard some talks behind the scenes about some little rumors out there that maybe NVIDIA is actually working on a next generation custom chip for Nintendo that also is backwards compatible, so they don't have to abandon the Switch. They can call it Switch Pro or Switch, whatever they want to do with it. So if that happens in 2, 3, 4 years, that can keep Nintendo up to date to compete with other platforms that come out. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, but Nintendo obviously has a long ways to go. There's ways they can improve the Joy-Con controller, not just adding new buttons, just making the Joy-Con controller better or making the Switch better in a revision. Some people talked about how they have issues with wobble on their Joy-Cons. I don't have that issue on mine, but people probably use it exclusively in portable mode or throw it in their backpack without a case or something like that. Maybe they put a bit more pressure on their Joy-Cons and it's caused some wobble or something. That's a design thing they might be able to fix. I feel like the wobble is probably caused by the fact that either the metal's bending or the plastic is wearing or bent or something. It happens just over time. Things wear and tear. And you want something that's a little more durable. Nintendo might be able to put that in a Switch revision. Just like getting rid of the bezel, adding a 1080p screen, putting in at least a Tegra X2 that's more power efficient, so you have that extra power to run a 1080p screen. And also not just being more power efficient, it's actually more powerful than a Tegra X1. So being able to take portable mode from 720p to 1080p in games might not be as difficult. It's also going to take games like Doom and Wolfenstein and make them run at higher resolutions more often because there's going to be more headroom. But I digress. There's a lot of directions Nintendo can go, and Panic Button highlights that. And Panic Button is a shining example of what I want to see done with ports in the future on Switch. Anyways, folks, you guys let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below. I'm Nathaniel Rufflejans from Nintendo Prime. What I do want to end this on is one more note on Warframe. Unfortunately, it will not have crossplay on any platform because they just don't have that implemented right now. They said they want to implement it in the future. They're kind of waiting on PlayStation 4 to allow it, so we could be waiting a while. Anyways, folks, I'll catch you guys in the next one.